Everyone, it's Brian Harman, President and CEO of the United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation, joined by my esteemed co-host, Dr. Phil Yeske, for another episode of the Powerhouse podcast. We bring to you the powerhouses of the mitochondrial disease world, including Dr. Yeske. You're a powerhouse yourself, Phil. I should give you that title each and every single time.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Doing a lot of big things. There's a lot of new and exciting things happening at UMDF and in the mito world. And Phil is often the power behind that. A few of the things I wanted to make sure we got our community up to speed on is just some of the powerful mission delivery that's been happening here at UMDF. I know one that is near and dear to your heart. I know you don't pick favorite programs, but one you put a lot of time into is our genetic testing program. And we've ran a couple pilot phases of this. Sure. We know that the challenge of getting patients diagnosed and how important that is. You've been on the front lines of sustaining a program for the organization and for the community.
Yeah, when we ran those pilot programs, we said that we wanted to learn from them, collect data, and then try to come back with something that takes the best of what we've accomplished. And I'm really excited to share that we're now ready to move with the next phase of our no-cost genetic testing programs. And we'll be using a little bit of a blend, right, of clinician-initiated, but really patient-facing. So we'll return to our partnership with Probably Genetic. And our goal, as always, is to try and get as many patients that are still on the diagnostic journey diagnosed as quickly as possible.
This recording is being done here at the end of April. So just depending on when this drops out on social media, but we should expect this here in the next couple of weeks or so to be live with the program.
Yeah, we're really in final dotting the I's and crossing T's to get the program ready. But communications will be going out to patient community and clinician community here very soon.
Excellent. Well, speaking of getting the program ready, our world-class mitochondrial medicine conference is coming once again this year to my beloved Cleveland, Ohio at the end of June, where we'll be bringing in the very best and brightest of the mitochondrial disease research and clinical worlds. And importantly, our patient community comes together to learn and support each other. And something I'm really excited about this year's conference is this focus on getting our patient community what we're describing as research ready. We want to kind of demystify drug development and help our patient community understand that a little bit more. I know this is something that you live and breathe every single day, Phil, in carrying that banner.
Yep. It's part of a long-term vision of creating a culture of clinical trials inside mitochondrial disease. And so education and exposure to what it means to be involved in clinical research, participating in clinical research, these are all steps towards our community having this larger culture of everything we're doing is about trying to get to treatments and cures for our patient community.
Yeah, and speaking of that, something that the UMDF has been proudly on the forefront of for 27 years is funding research in a variety of different ways. And the UMDF is a proud funder of 125 plus labs, I think, if I count our history, the last list I saw throughout our history, the projects we've been able to do, unlocking nearly $70 million in Department of Defense for mito programs. There's many different ways that we're funding research. Our annual grant cycle, I think, just came to a close. We're under review of those projects right now and anticipating announcing those winners near the conference. But maybe just give us,
Correct.
I don't know, under the hood a little bit in terms of what we might be able to expect this year.
Yeah, a really great set of applications this year. Probably one of the strongest. That's not just my opinion. I've heard this from multiple advisors that have been involved. Really strong research. And I think the message is getting through, right? That UMDF wants to put its mission dollars to work in advancing those treatments and cures. So whether it's basic research, translational research, or clinical research, tell the story of why our investment in you through a grant is going to make a difference for the patients ultimately, or has the potential. So yes, the review is active, and we're really excited about to see what comes out the end of the machine here in the coming weeks.
It's always exciting and important to us when we can connect our generous donor community with world-class research. That's the goal out there. We know we need to expedite the process of getting therapeutics across the finish line. And we've done that in many different ways throughout our history at UMDF. And one new way that we're doing it, recently announced, is through our new venture philanthropy initiative. And something that you and I both, Phil, put a lot of time into to make happen for this organization. I'll give ourselves a little bit of a back pat here. But importantly for today's conversation with our special guests, it took a team of dedicated advisors and, probably most importantly, donors and companies who are behind these efforts to help accelerate drug approval. I know this is something, Phil, that when I first came to this organization 6 years ago, you wanted to make sure it was on my radar. And your advice to me was there was still some star aligning that needed to happen before we pressed go. And boy, what a joy it's been to be alongside you throughout the past 6 years, getting us to this point. And what a real pleasure it is to welcome in our guests today, who helped make this happen and also are on the receiving end of these incredible commitments of this new initiative for us. So please welcome to the Powerhouse from the UMDF Board of Trustees, Mr. Todd Lacey, and from our friends at Pierrepont Therapeutics, Dan DiPietro. Todd, Dan, good to be with you both today.
Likewise. Good to see you, Brian.
Good to be here. Thanks for having us.
Well, we're excited to talk to you a little bit about venture philanthropy, what that means for you, what it means for us. And Phil, it might be good for us first to kind of give a primer for the uninitiated to venture philanthropy, what that means for charities in doing good work and advancing their mission. You've been playing such a leadership role in this front. I'm going to let you have the floor first and just kind of share with our listeners a little bit about what is venture philanthropy.
Yeah, no, I'll give the the quick summary of it. But as you described, it's really just a novel means of delivering more mission, right? And so we deliver mission out of UMDF in many different ways, particularly in the research enterprise. But through venture philanthropy, we have the opportunity to advance research mission, but also have the opportunity to participate in a return on that investment in the companies that we're involved with as they continue to gain in valuation and have. We can take our position and reinvest that into more mission. So it's really just a way to be able to deliver more mission while more broadly de-risking the entire prime.
More impact, more often. We talk a lot about that at UMDF. Here's another way for us to do this. And our guests today are going to help us kind of walk through that conversation of how UMDF is doing that. And Todd, I want to turn to you first as a member of our board of trustees. When we launched this initiative, I came to you because of your finance acumen. You're the chair of our finance committee. You're a Mito dad. There's a lot of connections to you in this organization. And you're also just a guy who's always wanted to raise your hand and say, yeah, what can we do to go fast here? I was hoping you could give the listeners a little bit of perspective from the UMDF Board of Trustees, like why we saw this as the right thing to do right now.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, Brian. Yeah, I couldn't be more excited about this initiative. This venture philanthropy to me represents sort of the next level of investment that we as an organization can make, and has the potential to generate really an incredible return for the patients, and certainly has the opportunity to generate sort of financial return for the organization that, as Phil said, we can put back into the mission and just continue to double down on opportunities to fund therapeutics research, ultimately work towards a cure. So I think UMDF is incredibly well positioned to support this, being the world's largest mitochondrial advocacy foundation. I don't think you could find a better suited organization to really play such a big role in this initiative. So, and just the process itself has been really enjoyable and interesting, because it gives us the opportunity to learn about what's happening in the drug development area and all the exciting opportunities that are out there. And, I think Phil and his team and others have historically had a lot of exposure to these, but now to open that up to more of us to really try to evaluate them as investment opportunities gives us a frontlines perspective as to all the exciting and innovative things that are going on in the space. So, as I said, I'm thrilled about it, super excited about about our first investment that we'll talk about, I know, and looking forward to see what the future holds.
Thanks, Todd. And Dan, just by way of giving you a proper introduction here too, we're going to go a little bit deeper into your background, your organization, and the opportunity that UMDF has invested. But I would have probably failed miserably trying to read off your bio and your background. I was hoping you could do me a favor and just share with us a little bit. Who is Dan DiPietro?
Dan DiPietro. So, molecular biologist by training. I've been in the biotech investment and company creation fields for about 20 to 22 years now. So a lot of experience in assessing technology, biotechnologies, investing in biotechnologies, but more importantly, starting and operating new companies around very specific therapeutic products.
And something that I think is worth mentioning too, like happens so often in the mitochondrial disease or the rare disease community, is that we find our friends and passionate people along the way. And Dan's been someone along the way with UMDF who's always been a champion for our mission and for our cause. And for that, we're always grateful, Dan. We're going to dive a little bit more into kind of where we are now with venture philanthropy to provide a little more context to those who are tuning in. So UMDF went through this process, as I mentioned with Phil earlier. Gosh, it was probably over 10 years ago when we started to see this meteoric rise in charities utilizing a venture philanthropy model to advance research. And we knew our time wasn't quite there. We needed to make sure that the donor community and the science were aligned and that the deal flow could come in a way that we could then go invest in these opportunities. And Dan, you've alluded to it a little bit. You've been in the mito space for a little while now, and maybe you could just kind of give us a little bit of what the journey of mitochondrial disease therapeutic development has looked like in the biotech sphere over the past decade.
Yeah, I think that it's accelerating. There's been a real acceleration in terms of our understanding of the biology behind mitochondrial diseases. There's been a lot of developments in terms of diagnosing, stratifying patients according to their underlying disease etiology. And I think we're just now starting to see some of these therapeutics develop. So I think industry is kind of catching up with the academic advances that we've all kind of observed through mostly the UMDF conference, honestly. And so I think it's a great time to be in mitochondrial disease. There's a lot of interest in developing very specific strategies toward treating patients. And there's been, I would say a lot of movement over the last 10 years, which is, I guess, the length of time that I've been involved with, pretty close to being around for about 10 years in mitochondrial drug development.
And Todd, it rings true in terms of you think about, you've had a little bit of an insider's look of what the opportunities have looked like for us to evaluate and for us to review. I think one of the things that was really inspiring for me was we had there were opportunities to review. This wasn't, hey, let's go do venture philanthropy and hope there's some opportunity for us. I'm sure it felt for you like this was very real. There's something to actually evaluate and help move forward.
Yeah, I mean, again, not having had direct exposure to these types of opportunities prior to this initiative, I really had no idea or sense for how much activity is happening in the space. And as Dan just said, it sounds like it is a good time to be in this space, and there's a lot of interest and energy. And we know that mitochondrial dysfunction affects, millions of people and manifests itself in a lot of different ways. And so I think as people have understood that more and they realize there's such broad application for a lot of these therapeutics and these different initiatives that are happening, it's just generated tremendous energy and activity in the generalized mito space. So I was really thrilled when I saw the volume of opportunities that were coming to us for us to evaluate. And it's also been nice to be a part of the process to establish our underwriting protocols and all the due diligence and the things that we have taken very seriously to thoroughly evaluate each opportunity to make sure that we're using UMDF funds and the generous money from our donors in the most effective way possible. So yeah, it's been enlightening, and I think we'll continue to see more and more opportunities based on the trends that we've seen so far.
Yeah, it's a great point that we're talking about kind of building a business model around this too. There's so much that needs to be done or that needed to be done to do this right. And I want to talk more about that when we come back from this short break.
We hope you're enjoying the episode. The United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation's Mitochondrial Medicine Conference brings together researchers, clinicians, and patient families to work toward better outcomes for patients with mitochondrial diseases. Join us this year in Cleveland. Visit umdfconference.org. Let's get you back to the Powerhouse.
Yeah, Phil, we were talking about the importance of process in doing this right. These are significant funds that our donor community is entrusting our organization to steward. So that was something that we spent a lot of time in and benchmarked and worked with the attorneys and the tax friends and everyone to help us understand how these things work. But it got to this point where we could go do the work. And Todd and I were chatting a little bit about that, but maybe you can provide some insight at a high level of like what that means to move opportunities through the organization.
Sure. No, I think the advantage we have as an organization that's been around for 25 plus years, very active with research mission, is that, a lot of companies, a lot of opportunities would come across my desk. I can have a sort of a first conversation to understand at a high level the goals of the company. And then that's the beginning of a funnel, right? So that's sort of the acquisition at the highest level. Then we can begin a discussion, right, with our venture philanthropy investment committee and the advisors involved about, which of these companies are maybe the best ones for us to focus on next. And first, there's some sharing of non-confidential information. And then, of course, we move to confidentiality. And so the process just moves along. We're learning about the investment opportunity, but importantly, the company is learning about what UMDF is interested in and where we see it gives us an opportunity to really explore where there's strategic partnership opportunities. I'm sure we'll cover this if you haven't already. These investments are really meant to be seed catalyzing investments. We know that significant additional capital will be required to be successful for the companies. So truly, we have to try to make 1 and 1 add up to 3. We're doing this because both sides believe that there's something to be learned to the benefit of the patient community by having UMDF involved. And importantly, that the early stage companies that we're partnering with are also recognizing the importance of patient centricity and where UMDF can add value. So once we move to the investment committee, then it becomes a more traditional due diligence process where we'll ask the company to pitch to the committee, tell us about your team, tell us about your intellectual property, tell us about the target population, many different aspects of any kind of investment discussion that you would be having. And then in parallel, we're also saying, tell us about your science. And that's an opportunity for us to get our scientific and medical advisory board involved in making sure that there's a strong foundation of science around each of these opportunities. So I think fair to say, Brian, that our trustees really made it clear to us we still want this to be a foundation of good science and peer review that UMDF is moving forward. The investment opportunity is just layered on top of that.
A hallmark of UMDF for 27 plus years. And out of that initial ringer, our inaugural investment, where our committee was inspired by the science and believed in the leadership team and saw a pathway to strong business development, all the things, and so much more on top of that. Out came our first investment in Pierrepont Therapeutics. Of course, Dan, as a co-founder of the company, with us here today to talk a little bit more about the company, the opportunity. And I do want to dive into what does that mean to be a strategic partner? What does it mean for patients to engage in these opportunities? Dan, can you share with us first, what is Pierrepont Therapeutics? What are you all working on? Share with our community what we just invested through the Mito Fund on.
Sure. Pierrepont Therapeutics is developing an enzyme replacement therapy for a subtype of mitochondrial disease called MNGIE, which stands for mitochondrial neurogastric encephalomyopathy, which is a description of the symptomatology of the patients. And it manifests most troubles in the physiological manifestations are mostly gastrointestinal. And so the patients have dysmotility, there's nutrient absorption issues, and it is in most cases a fatal disease. So there's a huge unmet need, and our therapy is essentially replacing the enzyme that the patients are missing due to genetic mutations in that enzyme. And so from a scientific perspective, we think the approach has a lot of merit, has a lot of chance for success, and is similar to approaches used in other rare diseases that are due to mutations in a particular enzyme, non-mitochondrial diseases, but in this case, applied to a mitochondrial disease. And so for all those reasons, we're very excited about this particular technology, and we are hoping to rapidly get this into the clinic to treat patients.
Phil and Todd, I think we all left this process, or at this point in the process, left inspired by what Dan had just said. We had the luxury of experiencing that and learning throughout the entire process. And Phil, from a scientific side, we're very careful with our words in terms of what we think science can do at any given time. But I know this is one, as our committee looked at this and said, yes, the word that kept bubbling up was potentially transformational. And we don't have a chance to say that a whole lot in the mitochondrial disease world.
No, this is an example of if Pierrepont can be successful with getting to a label from the FDA to help the MNGIE patients. It's precision medicine, right? We are really on the spectrum between really managing the symptoms and potentially curing, right? It's much closer to being, disease modifying and changing the course of these patients' lives. And that's really exciting, right? For sure, I want to see these kinds of opportunities in our overall venture philanthropy portfolio. We wish we had 20 more like that. It's still the early days for mitochondrial disease, but the opportunity to be involved in one of the first ones companies to advance a very precision medicine oriented approach to helping mitochondrial disease patients, that's really exciting.
And Todd, I know your perspective throughout the review process weighs a little heavier on the pitch side. Is this a company that we can believe in? Can we see this company moving forward and growing and raising the money that's needed? While UMDF, Phil alluded to this a little bit, we love to have as much donor support as possible to fund these companies at the highest levels as possible. But we know the kind of the role that we're going to play in the fundraising arena. But Todd, maybe comment a little bit just on, kind of what you've been looking for as you've been hearing from pitches from companies.
Yeah, I certainly look at the people for sure. I am the farthest thing from the scientific and medical expert. That's for Phil and our medical advisors and experts to weigh in on. But just from a business perspective and investment opportunity, I for sure look at the people. And, Dan and his team have a track record of success, and they have successfully executed many times in the past. So just a proven team that I think myself and others have a lot of confidence in, and a well thought out business model and a professional pitch. The pitches, while, that's just one piece of kind of you call it the underwriting process. It's an important piece to really understand, the thought process of of management, their ability to articulate where they are in the process, their vision, their strategy. And, in the work that we did with Dan and his team, I know I came out of that incredibly confident in, as I said, the people, and the opportunity and the huge impact that this could really have. So, it's exciting. And again, to me, from a business perspective, it's important to align yourself with companies and with people that have done this before. And that's the case with Dan and his team. So really exciting.
We talk a lot about our role in de-risking, our organization, whether that's de-risking future investment in organizations. And, I think the power of UMDF, of galvanizing and mobilizing the patient community, is probably one of the most important things we do. We've made a significant investment with this opportunity. We will continue to do that, but a flag we will always carry is the voice of the patient. And one of the things that really inspired me in this process, in this particular opportunity, was Pierrepont's not just willingness, but strategy of working alongside UMDF as a strategic partner. And thought maybe we could talk a little bit about that, particularly as we think about what that might mean for future patient engagement with a program like this. Dan, some of your thoughts on that?
Yes. So we believe that the partnership with UMDF will result in better patient engagement for our company because of the presence that the UMDF has within the patient community. One of the things when we're dealing with rare diseases and diseases that haven't before been the subject of drug development or clinical trials is we need to engage directly with patients to better understand how the disease symptomatology affects them. And so one of the things that I foresee happening in partnership with UMDF is really engaging with MNGIE patients and their caregivers to better understand which are the symptoms that are most troublesome to them. What are ways of measuring the impact of our drug on MNGIE patients' quality of life and their caregivers' quality of life? And so I see that as being one really important aspect of the partnership. And then secondly, you mentioned before Phil's work with probably genetics and the genetic testing program. So MNGIE is also is a genetic, an autosomal recessive nuclear gene that plays a role in an important role in mitochondrial function. And so it is a disease that could be diagnosed via this genetic testing program. And so it's an area where you guys have already started the groundwork for that type of initiative. And we hope to leverage that in identifying MNGIE patients, globally.
This is a really important point, Dan. Right? I think we see this across the multitude of forms of mitochondrial disease, but MNGIE is very likely highly underdiagnosed. Right? So there are many patients out there on the diagnostic journey seeing GI specialists, other types of clinicians who aren't thinking about mitochondrial disease. They're looking at the symptoms and perhaps thinking about other diagnoses. So that opportunity to reach that clinical community, raise awareness of mitochondrial disease, facilitate the use of genetic testing earlier in the differential diagnosis, we hope that really adds up to more patients being identified, optimize their clinical care, and demonstrate to them that there's clinical research taking place that they're eligible for, and that might change the course of their disease. That's the broad mission goals around this.
Yes.
Todd, I think about from a board perspective, how so much of this just cuts across everything we do at UMDF. This is one of the challenges and opportunities of an organization like ours that does do research, education, advocacy, support. We do it all when it comes to a patient advocacy group, and we layer on this this type of funding too. But I know that doesn't come without its challenges of a board and an organization kind of prioritizing where they go. But some inside baseball, it does feel like our board of trustees and our organization is taking this kind of hyper focus on therapeutic development. Maybe just share some of your perspectives on kind of how you see this organization evolving here.
Yeah, I think we're at a very exciting point as an organization. I mean, we have a phenomenal staff, great leadership, thanks to you and Phil and others. We have amazing donors that are committed to the cause. We have incredible volunteers. And like you said, we have sort of a diverse approach. We're trying to tackle a lot at one time. And I think the therapeutic direction where we're headed is critical. I mean, ultimately, that's how you can make a massive impact across thousands, if not more, people. And I think venture philanthropy is as I said earlier, kind of the next level opportunity for us to invest in these development of these drugs. And we're going to continue to diversify the portfolio, but ultimately, in 3, 4, or 5 years, whoever knows how long it can take, but there may be a couple of very effective drugs on the market that we help support, and that could have a absolute life-changing impact on a lot of people. And that's incredibly exciting, and it's very tangible. I think sometimes Brian, we talk about this, it's a lot of what we do is very intangible, and people have to have faith in they're supporting this great organization that's trying to make an impact. And this is something that can be tangible, and really something can come out of it that people can see and touch and feel, and again, can have a huge impact on their lives. So this is something that I think the entire board is excited about. And as our donor community continues to get more familiar with what we're doing, I think we're going to just continue to see interest in being a part of it.
You mentioned it. It's worth mentioning many times on this podcast. None of this happens without the generous support of our donor community and 2 founding donors who made a transformational commitment of their own to help advance this. And for that, we're most grateful. Let's take a short break to recognize these special donors.
We hope you are enjoying this episode of the Powerhouse podcast. The Mito Fund was made possible by generous founding gifts made by the Kalaus family and the Wright family. We thank them for helping us ignite innovation. Read their stories as members of our Founders Circle at themitofund.org. Now, let's get you back to the Powerhouse.
Dan, you certainly have a history with the mitochondrial disease community, and hoping you could just share a little bit with our listeners of how you got into the mito world.
Sure. In 2015, 2016, we started a company called Modus Therapeutics, which was a collaboration with Dr. Michio Harano at Columbia University, who was developing and had very interesting early stage data utilizing a therapeutic for a disease called TK2 deficiency, which is a mitochondrial myopathy, genetically defined. And I think the 2016 UMDF meeting was my first, and it was clear there that the UMDF really provided the only forum for mitochondrial disease scientists and clinicians to get together and exchange information, and specifically targeted toward mitochondrial disease. And then it had this added benefit of including patients and caregivers at the conference, which was quite unique. And we felt immediately welcomed by the community. There was clearly a need, or there was clearly a recognition by all the stakeholders involved that in order for there to be drugs developed for mitochondrial disease, there needed to be a partnership between industry, startup companies like ourselves, entrepreneurs, investors, and the patient community and the foundation. And from there, the product, we raised capital from external funding. We funded ourselves, really bootstrapped the company in the early days. And then the data started looking really profound in patients in the clinical trial. And then quickly we got the interest of larger companies. And then in late 2019, the company was acquired. We stayed involved with the product, very closely involved, since we developed a lot of knowledge in the space. And hopefully that product will be approved very soon. And we remained interested in mitochondrial disease. It just so happens that Dr. Harano is also involved in the treatment of patients with MNGIE. And so we know a lot of the same KOLs, a lot of the same scientists, and the same patient advocacy group that we've grown, very close to. And this seemed like a perfect next chapter for us in developing this product for MNGIE.
How fortunate we are to have so many leaders in this space who step up and put in yeoman's work to move this forward. And Phil, it's a theme we see over and over again. We talk a lot about grit. We acknowledge in this community that there are failures, and there's going to be more failures as we chart a course towards wins. But this is something we see time and time again, is people getting back up and moving forward.
Absolutely. Developing drugs, therapeutic development is really challenging. Yeah. And it's hard on the patient community that invests their time and effort into being a part of clinical trials that sometimes ended in failure. But it's not really failure. It's research. And even a trial that doesn't achieve its goals, we've learned a lot, right, from each and every one of those. And so we build upon that. It's hard on the companies, right? It's a significant capital investment. It's hard on the investors that are in those companies. So it's a challenging space, but really where I think we have the opportunity, right, to play a role is bringing those dots together, right, at the earliest stage possible, and ensuring that there's a patient centricity to everything that's taking place. Let's make sure we're working on the opportunities and designing trials that are very patient centric. And that's what's exciting about this, is it only reinforces the mission we've been delivering for 27 years.
Mm. Dan, on that note, just talk to us a little about just what keeps you in a company like Pierrepont and the bright people you're working with just moving forward every single day, knowing the great unmet need. How do you remain inspired?
I think you touched on it. MNGIE is a horrible disease, and we think we have a therapeutic based on the preclinical model results that we have, and based on the mechanism of action and the biology. We really think that we have a therapeutic that has a really good shot at having a real impact on patients' lives. And so that's really the motivator. We've spoken to a number of families who've been impacted by MNGIE. And the idea that we potentially have a product that can ease their burdens is for sure the number one reason that we remain excited on a daily basis. Because like Phil mentioned, there are ups and downs to drug development, and keeping that focus and making sure you understand where the motivations come from is very important to just maintain momentum.
And Todd, it's fair to say we believe too. It's part of the reason. It is the reason why we invested $500,000 into this program. This is a meaningful investment from our organization on the shoulders of a generous donor community. We couple belief with strong due diligence and strong process, and rooted in excellence and really bright people looking at these things. But since you're my boss as my trustee here, give you the floor of just kind of how you would kind of put a bow on all this in terms of what it means for our organization and ultimately our patients.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've framed it out nicely. It's very simple. We are here to fund research, treatments, cures, and that's what we're here to do. And we're trying to find the best and brightest minds that are behind that and align with that mission. And we're trying to connect the generous resources from our donors with those bright minds and move in a responsible way, but with significant urgency, because there is a massive unmet need. And I think this investment in Pierrepont and the general initiative of venture philanthropy just encapsulates all of that. It's aligning resources with the best and brightest to get us to the outcome that we're all focused on. And to me, that's personally, I'm honored to be a part of it. It's thrilling. We're on the front lines of some really exciting things. We're fortunate to have folks like Phil and Dan and all the great minds, and obviously yourself, Brian, that are committed, smart, focused, and just wake up every day trying to reach our goals. So I couldn't be more excited about where we are as an organization and this investment in particular.
That's why you give Todd the floor to close our conversation today with the two of you. That couldn't put it any better, Todd. Thank you. Not just because you called me smart. I don't get that a whole lot on here. I always call everybody else smart, but no, it's been.
I throw you in at the end. I knew
thanks so much, Todd. You're so nice. But it's been a real pleasure spending time with both of you today, and something that has been truly monumental for our organization. I know we're talking in what's what I'm looking for here, Phil? Superlatives. We're talking a lot of superlatives today. Monumental, transformational, extremely meaningful.
Right.
This is genuine. This is true for our organization. And quite frankly, we have legions of patients who are counting on us to do just that. And we can't do it without folks like you that are on the call here today, and many around our community who have stepped up to say, what can we do to help? Whether that's giving of your time, your treasure, being research ready as a patient, it's all meaningful. So Dan, Todd, I want to thank you for your time with us today. You've made excellent Powerhouse podcasts. Guests, you'd be even better if you shared this episode when we send it to your friends.
Well,
thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Bill, it's so great to see what has turned into from a passion project, in some respects kind of a kernel of an idea.
Yep.
And then what I think you and I both learned throughout this entire process is patience is a virtue. We have to make sure that our stars align in a way to make these things happen. And then you go find people who are just saying, yeah, let's go alongside with you. And our guests today are certainly testament to that.
Yep. When the time is right, you have to be willing to really push ahead. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't thank a couple other people. More than a decade ago, when I came on to staff in this role as Science and Alliance Officer, and I started talking to the board about, look what the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation is doing, right, to advance therapeutic development. I think we should consider whether it's a possibility in mitochondrial disease. The founder and CEO at the time, Chuck Mohan, embraced it and said, yeah, let's find out. Let's gather information. The board chair, Dan Wright, absolutely, let's do it. We spent time. We met with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. We met with the lawyers that helped them structure the deals. Yeah. We gathered a lot of information more than a decade ago. Ultimately, it wasn't the right time. We weren't ready, right? But it was the buy-in of those two believers, right, early on, that really gave us the momentum that over time we were going to keep our finger on the pulse of this. We were going to look at where the science was, the number of companies. We had to bring the trustees along, right, to be ready to move in this brand new direction, the way Todd described.
Right.
That all wouldn't have happened if they hadn't been supportive from the very beginning. So I'm very thankful for their contributions as well.
So well put. Such sage wisdom along the way and leadership. That's what it takes to get that done. Certainly grateful for the contributions of Dan Wright, Chuck, and countless others that as we went through our our discovery process for this, we leaned on so many experts who were just willing to give their time to help answer questions. How does this work? Can I have an hour of your time just to work through this? It's too important to
many
rush
examples
that process.
of just paying it forward, right?
Yes.
We learned some hard lessons along the way. Consider this, right? So helpful. And I know we're prepared to do the same, right, for other organizations. But we wouldn't be where we are today without all those contributions from the folks we talked to along the way.
And something else we're prepared to do is continue the great work that UMDF has been doing for over 2 decades outside of these new ways of funding research. What we've always held our hat on is our ability to go fund academic research, to fund infrastructure programs, to fund specific projects at these world-class institutions around the globe. Nothing's changing on that front. In fact, if anything, we're adding more on that front as well, too.
100% business as usual. I'd say we're leaning in, as you'd say, to the research landscape and looking for opportunities for UMDF to play a central stewardship role, try to bring all the stakeholders together, demonstrate collaboration, right, and everything that we're doing. And really, venture philanthropy is just layered on top of that. But nothing changes with what we've come to affectionately call UMDF Classic. We are still trying to deliver as much mission as possible, whether it's research, education, support, or advocacy.
There's many reasons why we love the classics, and it's our ability to continue to advance our mission through the generous support of our donors and a community that's always at the ready one way or another. And it's something that I'm very proud of in leading this organization, knowing that right alongside me are thousands of patient families whose voice will be elevated every single day to do this good work. Speaking of good work, Phil, it's been a pleasure spending time with you again on the podcast today, and certainly with our guests. Special thanks again to Todd Lacey and Dan DiPietro as we talked about our Venture Philanthropy Fund, which our listeners can learn more about at themitofund.org. Our marketing director, Andy, will be impressed that I remember to say the word before Mito Fund. You can learn more about how it all works on there. We should say, in case we have any friends who are in the drug development space, budding companies, early stage companies, get a hold of our dear Dr. Yeske to learn more about from a company standpoint. There's also some information on the website for that too. And be sure, as always, to like and subscribe. You can find this podcast on our YouTube channel. You can find it on Amazon, on iTunes. It's anywhere you find your podcast, you can find the Powerhouse. So good to be with you today, Phil. Thanks, everyone. Until next time, go fast.